public alert for Purdue's frozen, ready-to-eat chicken breast tenders labeled gluten-free.
You're about to waste $10 on dry chicken. Today, I'll show you the texture trap that 8 big chains fall into. Soggy breading, dry meat, or both. Here's the truth. Tasters consistently flagged bland coatings, heavy pepper that buries the meat, and prices that don't match portion or crunch. We'll stack all 8, reveal which ones fail the crunch test, and why that first bite often lies. Stick around and you'll know how to judge a tender in one glance, and which stops drain your wallet without the payoff. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Number 1, KFC. You bite in and the shell snaps loud. 2 chews later, the center turns chalky and that black pepper blooms like cologne, sharp and showy. Here's the problem. Heavy spice reads as flavor, but it often covers a dry core and a crust that wilts in minutes. Big tenders feel like value, yet the size holds heat and traps steam. The surface softens while the meat keeps cooking past juicy. Testers keep flagging the same pattern. A firm, pepper-packed coat that shouts while the chicken's own taste goes quiet. Larger pieces need a rest so steam can vent. Rush that step and you trade crisp for damp. Hold them in a closed box and the ridges act like a sponge. The crunch fades, the bite drags. Food science backs it. White meat loses moisture fast once it goes above target temp. Over-the-line muscle fibers squeeze like a wrung towel. You can dump on pepper and paprika and get a flavor hit, but that doesn't repack lost juice or fix a weak brine. It just hides the slip until your second bite. Here's the truth, you'll get crunch on contact, but if the meat runs dry and the shell collapses, you paid for noise, not texture. Scan for dark, pepper-heavy breading and oversized strips that cool soggy. Next up, a chain that charges more but gives you even less tenderness per dollar. Number 2, Popeyes. You expect the brand's magic to carry over. The first bite pops and you think it will. Then it stiffens up. Here's where it slips. The crust leans thick and rigid, so on a thin strip it feels like armor. That weight turns dense fast and the inside pulls stringy. You pay a premium, but the tender doesn't match the chain's bone-in level. One reviewer said the tenders tasted almost like they let an intern in the back try out a new experimental recipe. And that mismatch shows up in the chew. On bone-in, a heavy, flaky coat works because the meat has more mass and holds juice. On tenders, that same coat drowns the cut. If the brine doesn't reach the center, the rim tastes salty while the core dries out. Reviewers call out an ultra-crispy, nearly fried cornflake texture. That sounds fun, but when those flakes soak steam or oil, crunch collapses and the strip reads dry. Thick ridges also wick oil when fry oil turnover or flour hydration isn't dialed in. That leaves a sheen, a harder bite, and less moisture where you want it. Here's the kicker, great spice won't rescue a parched strip. Scan your box. If you see tall ridges and that glossy look, skip it. Bottom line, cost climbs while juiciness drops. Now at number 3, the texture trap flips to thin, dense meat with a tough bite. Number 3, Burger King. You grab a budget box thinking simple and safe. 4 strips, quick dip, done. Then the first bite hits stiff. The problem isn't spice, it's density. The meat chews tight like pressed foam. The coat stays flat, and moisture feels locked out. Reviewers often flag dryness and a compressed bite, which signals overmixing of the meat or overcooking. When muscle fibers tighten, they squeeze out water, so each chew feels harder than the last. Look at the surface. A smooth, uniform coat means fewer crags and pockets for airflow, so steam can't vent and the crunch never blooms. Thin, massed tenders also cool fast. That punishes hold times. The outside turns leathery while the inside goes mealy. If the fryer runs hot 1 minute and cool the next, oil shock toughens the skin and drives out more juice. Jen Harris at the LA Times called the chain's chicken fries long, rubbery nuggets and said, "An order of 4 felt like the light snack you might eat while you assemble a real snack." That nails the texture problem. Lots of chew, little payoff. Here's the truth. If the strip looks narrow with a pale, uniform coat, expect a tough chew and quick fatigue. Eat it fresh or skip it. Bottom line, cheap doesn't help when every bite fights back. Next up, a fan favorite that dodges dry meat but falls into a different trap. Number 4, Raising Cane's. You open the box and the tenders look right. Big, steamy with a clean, craggy coat. The first bite lands soft, crisp, and juicy. It feels like the win, but the flavor sits neutral. Without the dip, the breading reads plain, and on the ride home, that fine crust softens. price sits mid-high, so the crunch needs staying power. When it fades, you paid for size, not texture. Testers praise the heft and moisture. That part holds. The brand aims for broad appeal, which means lighter seasoning that leans hard on the sauce. One reviewer even said, Cane's could be my #1 if it had better seasoning. The experience turns on that cup. If it's missing, the tender tastes like a blank canvas. Here's the science piece. Steam in a closed box attacks delicate crusts fast, like rain on thin cardboard. Trapped moisture melts the crisp and warms the oil back into the breading. Venting and rest matter. A closed clamshell sabotages texture in minutes. You can keep juice and still lose snap. That's the trade. Here's the truth. You get moist meat, but watch the edges. If the tenders sit, the shell goes soft and the bite dulls. If crunch is your priority, eat fast or pass. Without the sauce, the shell won't carry the meal. Next up, a chain that promises punchier seasoning, but struggles to keep the moisture inside. Number 5, Zaxby's. You want a little heat and more character in the crust. Zaxby's promises that kick. The first bite teases spice and a rough, louder crunch. But here's where it slips. The meat runs thin and underbrined, so the chew dries out mid-bite. Some strips sing, others stall. That swing shows up when the fillet is too slim to hold juice, and the brine doesn't reach the center. Regional chains with bold coats can taste great, yet they live or die on batch control. Oil life, batter hydration, and cook time. Thin fillets overcook fast, 60 seconds too long, and the fibers clamp down like a squeezed sponge. Sauces help your tongue, not your texture. A dip can gloss the outside, but it can't refill moisture that cooked off. Reviewers flag variability store to store, and that's the heart of the texture problem. Consistency drives satisfaction more than spice. Fresh oil keeps ridges crisp instead of greasy. Proper batter rest gives even bubbles instead of hard plates. Tight timers curb the swing between juicy and jerky. Use your eyes before your wallet. Visual cues tell the story. Thinner strips and darker crusts often indicate a drier core, which drags the whole bite. Scan the tray for slim cuts, deep brown edges, and rigid shards. Final word, if you spot those signs, brace for a dry center. Flavor helps, but the texture tax still hits your wallet. Next up, a value player that leans crunchy and pays for it in moisture. Number 6, Church's Chicken. You hear the crackle and think, finally, real crunch. The first bite hits loud and clean, and you feel like you picked right. But 5 minutes later, the crust turns heavy and the meat loses juice. That high note fades in a closed bag. Condensation builds, the shell drinks it in, and the texture slides from crisp to clunky. Church's runs sturdy breading. That thicker coat lands strong at the counter, but it needs a rest event. When the handoff is rushed or the box seals tight, the structure soaks and slumps. Larger cuts seem like insurance for moisture, yet they magnify steam softening. The bigger the piece, the more vapor trapped against the crust. Here's the science in plain terms. As fried starch cools, it absorbs surface oil and locks up, like a sponge that pulled a spill and now feels dense. Without venting, the crust drinks both oil and water. That's double trouble for texture: slick outside, soggy inside, weaker snap. Hold times speed this up. Each minute off the fryer is a step down in crisp and a step up in weight. Here's the truth: eat in and eat fast or skip. If your bag feels humid or the lid has no vents, you're already behind. Bottom line, when crunch speed runs to soggy, you paid for a moment, not a meal. Now at number 7, a wing chain that treats tenders like an afterthought. Number 7, Wingstop. You want wing-level flavor on a tender. The sauce list is long and loud. It feels like a win before you even open the box. But heavy sauce on a fine crust kills crunch on contact. Under that glaze, the meat turns rubbery when it's overcooked or held too long under heat lamps. What sounds bold turns dull in the chew. Here's why. Sauce first shops nail wings because skin fights moisture. Fat in the skin forms a barrier so it can take a toss. Breading is porous. It drinks liquid fast, so the snap vanishes. Drenching strips is like pouring water on chips. You keep the taste, but you lose the crunch you paid for. Moisture and acid speed the slide. Many sauces carry both, so the crust breaks down faster. Tenders that sit under heat tighten. Those muscle fibers clamp and push out juice. When you sauce them hot, that glaze masks dryness for a moment. Then the second bite exposes the rubbery core. Operational habits matter. Heavy ladles, early tossing, and long holds all stack the deck against texture. Even a base with a nice crunch and a ranch with an ideal consistency can't survive that soak if the timing is off. Here's the kicker. If you hear no crunch after sauce, you're in the texture trap. Ask for sauce on the side or expect a limp coat and a tired chew. Next up, a reliable name that splits the room. Clean crunch, distinct flavor, and a tender that still can miss for texture purists. Number 8, Chick-fil-A. You expect crisp edges and steady quality. This brand delivers that look on cue. The tenders land neat, uniform, and lightly golden. But the breading runs light and the seasoning and marinade are distinct. That signature taste is a plus for fans, yet for texture purists who want a neutral, loud crunch. The coat feels thin and the bite leans on dips. You end up chasing flavor with sauce instead of getting it from the shell. Testers praise the balance of exterior to meat and a steady fry. The bite stays tidy, not greasy, with a clean snap at the start. Still, that hallmark flavor can pull focus from the crunch test. In a warm bag, the thin coat softens fast like a fresh cracker in a steamy kitchen, so the sound fades by the time you get home. Here's the research-backed piece. Light coats lose crispness faster in closed packaging because steam has less structure to fight. Marinades help juiciness by binding water in the meat, but they also steer flavor away from classic tender neutrality. That trade gives you moisture, yet it can push the profile sweeter or more distinct than you want. Final word, you'll likely get a clean bite. But if your checklist is loud crunch plus neutral chicken taste, this profile may not hit. Sauce can help, but that's a crutch, not a fix. Here's the truth, the first bite lies. Loud crunch can hide dry meat and a soggy finish. You pay for sound, not satisfaction, when the crust collapses and the core runs tight. Do the 2-second scan. Size versus venting. Big pieces in a closed box steam out fast. Crust ridges versus oil sheen. Gloss means grease, not crisp. Quick press for springy moisture. If it feels stiff or leaks oil, skip it. Dry or soggy? Walk away. Want the truth about what's actually safe? Subscribe now and I'll show you what to avoid, what passes the crunch and juice test, and the few spots that earn your money.